So good morning, everyone. Welcome to another morning training. This morning we have Dave Lewis, who's going to be presenting to us. Thank you very much, Dave, for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
You're well. Yeah, great. So take it away and we will, let's get started.
Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna, let's see, is my screen being shared right now?
It is not.
Okay.
So hold on one second. I guess it would help if I gave you permission to do so.
Yes.
Yes. And now you do, Dave. Thank you.
Okay. So let's do this. Is this up right now?
Yes, it sure is.
Okay. Let me just get this into slideshow. There we go. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Dave Lewis, like Sandy said. I'm currently an occupational therapy student at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences. That is located in Florida. However, my campus was out in San Diego, California. I'm also a former employee of Center for Spectrum Services. I was there for about a year back in 2013. And that experience at Center for Spectrum really opened a lot of doors for me as far as professionally and kind of stepping into my career. And ultimately, it kind of got me to where I'm at now. So today I'll kind of be talking about that journey a little bit, some of the things that led me to that, and then just some areas of occupational therapy specific things that are relevant for me both personally and then professionally. And hopefully I can apply some of that to what you guys do at Center. So let's look at some of the objectives for this. So the first thing, like I said, I'll discuss some of my background, my current doctoral capstone project, which is related to outdoor activities, outdoor play, and the role of occupational therapy in those settings. I'm also going to highlight some relevant supports and skills that I found have kind of helped me throughout my career, and just things to highlight and kind of talk about. That'll be where we have some discussion. I'm also going to introduce some OT concepts. I have some videos for that to kind of help make sense of it, and some diagrams. We can kind of talk about that stuff, just some ideas when you're working in school settings. And really, if you're going to be working with people with disabilities, I think these are really good concepts to understand and be able to apply and think about when you're doing that type of work. Then from there, I'll link some of those concepts specifically to outdoor play. It's the start of summer right now. Schools aren't in session. It's a really good time for some of our kiddos to be getting outdoors and seeing what that looks like and how we can relate it to some of these occupational therapy concepts. Then we'll go on and I'll identify some resources that are useful for teachers, teacher assistants, students themselves, and also families. We can kind of talk about those. I'll kind of go through some of the websites I have there and some of the resources, and hopefully there's some value there. And then at the end, we'll take some questions. So my background, I went to SUNY Oneonta. I have a degree in criminal justice, a degree in sociology, and a minor in communications, none of which really led me into a career of working with people with disabilities. When I was in my undergrad education, I had no idea I was going to work with kids, work with people with disabilities, follow into a healthcare profession. I really just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I graduated, my best friend and I, we road tripped the country for 3 months. We drove 11,000 miles. I came back to New York and I really needed a job. So one of my close friends at the time was working at Center for Spectrum Services in Ellenville, Lindsay Fairchild. I think you guys had a presentation with her recently. And she said, they're looking for substitute teaching assistants. You want to check it out? And I said, Lindsay, I have no experience working with kids. I have no experience working with people with disabilities, but I need a job. Sure, I'll check it out. So I started up at Center for Spectrum Services as a sub teaching assistant there, and obviously got to meet some of the people in on this presentation. I got to meet Sandy, and that experience really opened a lot of doors, like I said, and it just was one of those things that kind of, it was as the first exposure to so many things, working with kids, working with people with disabilities. It just felt right, and it felt like something that I could want to do. And I used that opportunity to kind of advance myself in my career. I moved out to San Diego, and I got a job working at another non-public school for students with disabilities. It's called the Sierra Academy of San Diego. I was there for 5 years. That experience really solidified the fact that I want to pursue OT and not necessarily teaching. I took on a lot of roles there. I developed into the adaptive physical education teacher, and I got to really just work with a great group of people and see not only a program for children 3 to 7 years old, like at Center for Spectrum, but also the population at Sierra Academy was 9 to 22. So I got a good range of experience working with different students of all ages and with different types of disabilities. So all of that kind of built the foundation for me wanting to pursue occupational therapy. So at the start of 2018, I got into the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences out in California. I'm currently finishing up my doctorate in occupational therapy, and I'm graduating this August. Stoke for Life. Stoke for Life is a nonprofit adaptive surfing organization. I threw that one in there mostly because it showed me that I can align some of my personal interests and my passions with some of my professional areas of expertise. And it just really was kind of an opening of a door into occupational therapy and outdoor recreation and outdoor play and those types of roles and settings. So let's look at some of those supports. So I just have a list of some supports here. I'm sure everybody agrees that these things are important and can be supports when you're working with these types of populations. I've got a couple of questions on there in the white boxes to consider. I'll go through this list and then we'll go over the questions. So the school directors, I was really lucky to have great support from my directors at both schools. Obviously, Sandy was the first director, and then when I was out in San Diego, my director's name was Brandy. So Sandy and Brandy really helped to shape the support and the leadership that I had. I always felt comfortable around them, being myself, being able to kind of highlight the things I did well and the things that I needed more learning in. And I always felt just really comfortable going to them. So definitely huge support along the way. Colleagues and classmates, again, working in these roles, I think it's important to have people that you can go to that are your peers, that are on the same page as you. And that can kind of help develop and foster a really good culture in the workplace. Trainings and certifications. This has been huge. Sandy was the first influence for me to go and pursue these types of opportunities with these populations. Tom Caffrey, as I think you guys had a presentation with, he did a presentation that I attended, that was seven years ago now. And I still think back to that experience, and when I'm working with pediatric populations, I still draw from those things I learned from that training. So those have just been super important, and I think whenever you get an opportunity to pursue trainings and certifications, I think it's important to take advantage of those opportunities, as learning is endless, and we can continue to learn 20 years into our career, 5 years into our career, however long we're into something, we can keep learning from those who have similar experiences and can provide input on that. So, and then environment and culture, that is one of the things that I think is a huge support. And one of the things I think that I found at the Sierra Academy out in San Diego was that the culture there was just amazing. And we really saw the student population thrive because of the culture that was developed from the teachers, from the teaching assistants, from everybody involved, all this, the service providers. So let's see, I think if I come out of this and go back to the Zoom, we can discuss these questions a little. The first one is leadership. So when we talk about leadership, that's not necessarily always your boss or the person you directly report to. These can be people that are, your peers that, you know, maybe just have some qualities that you admire that you'd like to see in yourself. And then I also want you to think about how can you emulate qualities that people think of when they think of a leader. So it's a twofold question. Who are some people that you look to in the workplace as leaders? And then how do you yourself emulate some of those leadership qualities for those around you and those you're working with? And I think I'll go, if I go to the, maybe if I stop sharing. Let's see. So maybe, I'm not sure if we'll be able to actually answer these. Let's try that. Okay, so it's chat now. If anybody wants to chime in, if not, we can just keep moving forward with the questions there and some of the things to talk about. I'll give you guys like a minute to type in if anybody wants to.
Okay. So, I mean, I'll chime in, Dave, people have a chance to chime in, but those are really great questions, because the support that you receive at work is so instrumental in how well you can perform your job. And so feeling like you have that support and finding, you know, finding your tribe, right? So at school, one of the things that we say is, in Allenville, you know, we say we miss our work family, right? Because we miss our work family because it's
yeah.
people.
I mean, that definitely plays into the culture of the workplace, and I think, you know, especially with the populations that we work with, they pick up on that. And, you know, if there's issues between staff members in the classroom that changes the interactions with the students, you know, they're going to pick up on that. So I think fostering a culture where you're able to, you know, have conversations with people that, you know, ultimately are going to benefit your students in the long run. I think that's where, you know, that culture can be really important. I'm going to move on. I'll go back to sharing the screen here. And let's get into, okay, so just some things to consider when you think about your workplace, leadership, culture, some of the skills that have kind of developed for me. I've been working with these populations now for 7 years. So the first one I have there is therapeutic use of self, and I've got a definition of it there on the right. This is the planned use of your personality, your insights, your perceptions, and your judgment. And that's, you know, as a teacher, as an occupational therapist, any role where you're working with anybody really, this can come into play. And everybody's therapeutic use of self is going to look differently. It should be you being your authentic self to a degree where what you're good at helps you take that role as a teacher, as a therapist. And especially working with pediatric clients, this is where we get an opportunity to highlight some of our skills. If you know, we want to use humor to our advantage. If we're a really active person, we could get our students, you know, out of their chairs and get them involved with, you know, whatever lesson you're trying to teach. Bring yourself to the table when it comes to that lesson is really the understanding of therapeutic use of self. Positivity, that's, you know, in anything you do, that's going to be important. At Center for Spectrum Services, positivity was definitely one of the things I found helped me learn, because like I said, I had no experience, and there were a lot of times when I would do something and I wouldn't do it the right way, but the way that I would be told I didn't do it the right way was very positive. And so it wasn't an experience that hampered my confidence and my own self-esteem. It was something that I learned from and said, okay, next time, you know, I will do it this way. So that positivity, even if you're, you know, working with your colleagues and, you know, they're doing something you might not agree with, addressing that in a positive way can have a huge effect on their confidence or self-esteem. I've been in situations where I've had bosses or supervisors with a really negative way to approach things, and it really just like did a big hit on my confidence. And then it was like a snowball from there. All the interactions I had with the kids I was working with were just not, I couldn't reach that therapeutic use of self because of there was a lack of positivity. So it really kind of all snowballs together. And that kind of goes with everything on this list. The desire to learn, that's just, that's an innate thing. It's, I want to be better at this. I may feel like I'm good at this, but this person does it this way and I can learn from that experience. That ties in again with the openness to feedback, especially working in schools. Everybody sees their students through their own lens. Whether if I'm an occupational therapist, I'm looking at it through this lens. Speech may look at it this way. We're all on the same team when it comes to the bottom line. So bring that feedback to your peers, and then also be open to receiving it about yourself. So that, again, just ties right into communication and teamwork. I won't harp on that one. And then a roles mindset. So this was huge for me when I moved out to San Diego. I started taking on roles that I had never done before. I had only had a year of experience at that point, and I was taking on a role of leading the school, which was about 60 students, through 30 minutes to an hour activity, standing up in front of the whole school, all the teachers, all the service providers. And, at first it was something I wasn't necessarily comfortable with, but then getting that feedback and that positivity and the communication from my coworkers kind of really helped build that within me. So how can you grow into these roles? A few more questions here. I did see the chat opening up a little, so I'm going to stop sharing to go back to that. Just some more questions here if you want to type in. What roles are you comfortable with, and how do you grow yourself into those roles? Or if you have some examples of therapeutic use of self, we can discuss that a little bit. I'm going to stop sharing so I can look into the chat here. Okay, so Corinne says, for me, this is as my first year at this school and my first year working with children since high school. For me, it was my whole team. They all helped me learn and lead me in the right directions in other classrooms too, the whole school really. See, that's what I picked up when I was working at Center for Spectrum too. They wanted me to succeed. Everybody wants the team they're on to be successful. Nobody wants to see somebody floundering or, in a role that they're not comfortable in. And I think, like Corinne mentioned there, just having that feeling like you have a team behind you when you're doing something new can really make or break the experience. So thank you, Corinne. Melanie says, I started 2 years ago as a sub, and it was very overwhelming the first couple of weeks. Yes, I can relate to that. As I started to get put in the same classes, I found a bunch of different staff to emulate. Yes, absolutely. And as I settled into a full-time position, a bunch of staff members have been wonderful. Any questions are answered without judgment. I love working at the center. That's, pretty much what I've been saying. And I'm glad that that's kind of echoing here when we talk about these settings that we work in, because while center is a great example of that, I feel like all schools should really value that. Like I said, I did have one experience that was pretty negative for me when I was working in pediatrics that I've been able to look back on and say that's not the way it should be, compared to the couple of really good situations I've had with Center and with Sierra Academy, to be like, more so that's the way it should be done. And with as far as emulating staff that you find have valuable skills, that was huge for me. The role models that I've had working in these settings, I still pull from the things I've learned from them, and it's been years. So that's definitely important there. Thank you, Melanie. Catherine says, hi, Catherine. She says, yes, our school has dynamic people, and the positivity is always present from Sandy and the front team to everyone in the school. It makes working enjoyable, and we feel that anyone can ask for help without feeling awkward. Dave, I remember your positive attitude when you worked with us and how much the children and staff enjoyed working with you. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think that's a huge part of it, is just being comfortable with the people you work with and not making people feel awkward. That's huge. And I did have a supervisor. I'll share a little it was one of my fieldwork experiences, which are required for us to get our degree. It's a 12-week rotation. I was working in pediatrics with an occupational therapist. And I got to say, the culture at that clinic was just pretty sour. And every day I would leave and feel really kind of terrible about the experiences I had. And I tried to bring it up with some of the supervisors I had there. And just the whole culture of the organization wasn't agreeing with me and a few other people that worked there. I was there as a student. So for me, I just wanted to do my 12 weeks and get out of there. It ended up being a situation where our school came in and met with the clinic, and we decided to go a different route. I won't harp on that too long, but it just did give me a lot of insight into the way things should be and the way things shouldn't be. And that was valuable in itself. But like I said, centered sound, all the employees here, and from my experiences, has always been really positive. So let's see. Lori said, I like the open communication our team has. Everyone's voice is heard. Yes, that's absolutely important. Lori says, I worked in a BOCES program for over 10 years, and then I went to a residential facility, and was in that for 6 years. But when I came to CSS, and when I arrived here, I felt comfortable right away. And that is actually the first job I've had that I felt that I felt appreciated and part of a team, and for that I'm grateful. So everyone can kind of pull on their own experiences and say, this was an opportunity I had that made me feel good about what I do, made me feel good about who I work with, and kind of fostered that. And then other experiences that maybe had the adverse effect. So just some things to keep in mind when we talk about how we approach these situations and the environment that we create within these situations. I'll come back to sharing my screen now, and we'll move forward with some of the OT specific stuff here. Thanks for that discussion. I appreciate it. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my current capstone project. So for my doctorate, I have to create a capstone project that is a proposal and implementation. I have decided to look at the roles of occupational therapy in both outdoor recreation and in summer camp programs. Through this process, this has been ongoing for over a year now, I have identified several areas that OT can work in to help develop outdoor recreation and summer camp programs to best benefit these populations. So some of the ways that this is done are through direct services. This is going to be an OT with a caseload working in the outdoors on things like motor development, visual processing, sensory skills, developmental goals. We can also look at inclusion and accessibility. This has been a strong focus of my project. When we talk about inclusion and accessibility, we talk about how we can make the outdoors something that everybody can access. So people of all abilities, how are they accessing the outdoors, these outdoor recreation programs, these activities, whether it's a camp program, and this is where we look at the facilities of a camp program and also the activities within those programs. A big issue with a lot of these programs is funding. A lot of them are nonprofits. So an area of my project has looked at ways to work with different foundations and also government grants to create funding opportunities for developing these types of inclusive facilities and practices within these programs. I've also done some research into current camp practices, current programs that are going on that try to foster inclusive and accessible practices and mindsets. Another big part of this is really OT specific, is activity adaptations. That's when we look at an activity from start to finish, what's required to complete that activity, both on a personal level, what's required of the environment around us, and just ways that we can adapt those activities on an individual basis. I know you guys do that a lot when you're doing your lessons in school, and it's a very useful skill. Some of the other things I've looked at are adaptive gear and equipment. And then a big chunk of this has been education and training. So there are some organizations out there that provide education and training on inclusion and accessibility, how to foster communities and environments that kind of take all these things in consideration. And then the last role of OT that I've looked at is consulting and advocacy. So that's a lot of times working with communities to develop partnerships, whether it's non-public schools like Center for Spectrum Services, different types of foundations in the community, and just creating ultimately just a larger community and being able to advocate with that larger population. So this is all kind of accumulated in a company I've developed called Access Outdoors Occupational Therapy. And I'll go into some of the OT concepts here. So this is I'm going to talk about 3 different models that we use in occupational therapy. And I just want you to be mindful of these as they are foundational and important to how we frame ourselves and how we frame our work when it comes to people with disabilities, students in schools, all of those things. So we've got OT Miri here. She is a guru in the OT world. She talks very fast. She's going to go through, give us an outline of these 3 models, and then I'll try to break them down a little further and more detailed for you guys as well. So I'll let her go now.
So Dave, it's hard for us to hear.
Okay.
So I wonder, just in the part of screen sharing, there was 2 boxes that you could check. One says optimize video, optimize audio. Underneath the screen sharing, feature, before you actually hit share. I don't know if you.
Let me pull that back out. Here we go.
Okay.
Share computer sound.
Yeah, so you want to make sure those 2 boxes are checked. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. Let's pull it back here.
I'm gonna make a video and I'll publish it tonight. But the ecology of human performance in the most simple terms is looking at how our context and our environment affects our performance, hence ecology of human performance. Ecology literally means interaction between organisms and the environment. In this case, interaction between human affects our performance. If there's one thing that you need to remember that there is a heavy emphasis on the context with the EHP model, because Winnie Dunn wanted to create a model that would help us understand the complexities of the context and how it influences our performance. So context, context, context. There are 4 constructs: the person, the task, the context, and the performance. The way that it works is the person, context, and the task will work together to create the performance, what the person wants to do, their occupational performance. And when those 3 interact, you get the performance. And there are 5 intervention approaches for the EHP model. That is, establish and restore. This is looking specifically at their strengths and weaknesses, and you're trying to restore and increase their skills or abilities. There is modify and adapt. That's the second intervention strategy. So you can modify and adapt the context as well as the task. Alter, this is different than modify and adapt, right? You're completely changing. So changing the environment altogether to find the most optimal context. The 4th one, prevent. This is not necessarily preventing or working on an identified deficit. There might not be a deficit, but it was when you anticipate a problem that could occur and you prevent it. 5th, create. You are creating opportunities to enhance optimal performance and to increase adaptability and complex performance. So 5 intervention strategies. PEO model does not necessarily have these very specific intervention strategies. They pretty much just, the practitioner is free to choose intervention strategies that may enhance the occupational performance. But the main difference for the PEO model is that it's looking at the fit of the person, environment, and the occupation. So instead of the EHP model, which was looking at the complexity